Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NASCSP's National Community Action Theory of Change and National Goals, Tying It All Together webinar. I'm Jovita, your moderator. Today's webinar on Roma Next Generation Proposed Updates and Changes will be presented by Lauren Cook, CSBG Team Lead at NASCSP, Rae Tamblyn, Research and Communications Analyst at NASCSP, Tiffany Marley, Learning Communities Project Director with the Community Action Partnership, and Barbara Mooney, the Director of the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. All attendees are on mute. If you have questions during the webinar, you can ask questions using the chat option on the webinar toolbar. The toolbar is, of course, located on the right-hand side of your screen. There, you'll see a text box where you can type a question for all panelists. Questions will be read aloud and answered during the Q&A portions of the webinar. When typing your questions, please identify the slide your question relates to, as well as the panelist you'd like to respond. In order to keep to our schedule, if we don't have time for all questions, we will compile your questions into an FAQ following the webinar. The webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the NASCSP website. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rae Tamblyn.
Hi, Jovita, and hello, everyone on the webinar. I hope you have all had a chance to go to our website and take a look at the pieces of Roma Next Generation that are live and available for your review. Thanks in large part to the hard work of the Roma Next Generation work group, as well as our partners and peers, such as all of you who are on this webinar. Over the past few years, we've been working diligently and have finally released these important elements of Roma Next Generation for our initial comment period. So each piece of the Roma Next Generation packet has been posted on the NASCSP website using the following short link that you can see on the screen in front of you. And we've also built a Roma Next Generation component guide, which is going to be a living document that's intended to help you navigate and understand the various elements of Roma Next Generation, as well as provide you a quick stop on the website for each of the elements and associated links and resources such as slides, the recording for this webinar, and the various surveys and discussion guides that are intended to support your review. Surveys will be available for each of the components and will serve as a primary method for us to hear your feedback. The survey for the theory of change is live and open, so we do encourage you to, after this webinar, to go and take a look at that as well as the other surveys. So we do encourage you to really use this Next Generation Components Guide as a quick stop and a quick reference to see which pieces are live and any modifications that have been done. As you know, as this series of webinars, we are holding those to inform you all of the thought behind the Roma Next Generation, answer your questions, and also get additional feedback. And I do encourage you to contact NASCSP at romanextgeneration2016@gmail.com. This will be one of the other ways that you can communicate with us and put your feedback in writing. But we do encourage you to go through the surveys as the primary method for submitting your feedback. Those surveys will also be really helpful in guiding and framing your work and as you move through all of the components, since we know that there are a great many pieces to this release packet. The webinar series schedule is intended to run during our initial feedback period. We also have a live in-person event that will be held at the NCAF Legislative Conference on March 17th. For those who will be in town for it, this will be an informal, highly interactive, and flexible session. It'll run from 11:45 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., and it will be very much like a science fair, if you will. So we'll have posters, and you can come by and ask any questions and dialogue with OCS, NASCSP, and the Community Action Partnership representatives who will be there. All of the webinars will be recorded and posted to the NASCSP website on that components guide. And and as you are now in attendance at the Roma Next Generation Theory of Change webinar. So the intent on this webinar is to describe Roma Next Generation and really review the purpose of a theory of change. So we want to consider the elements in the proposed Community Action National Theory of Change, and also discuss the ways in which a national theory of change can be used and may differ from a local theory of change. And we definitely want to identify the ways to help improve the quantity and quality of the network input during this initial comment period by identifying the sphere of influence in the outreach processes and thinking about discussion prompts. And we do encourage, again, for those who are intending to take the survey, there is opportunity for feedback by agencies, for individuals within the agencies, and in collaboration. So we'll discuss the survey a little bit later in this webinar as well. The legacy that we carry forward as community action deserves nothing less than all of us giving our best for the future. And poverty today calls for us to find new ways to achieve more and really measure our innovative and responsiveness to the challenges of our times. And with the organizational standards and the state and federal accountability measures, we've made great progress. But we need the input of the network to craft this next chapter of our management and accountability framework. We've done great things with Roma 1.0, and we're very excited for the Roma Next Generation process and to ensure that we are as inclusive of the network and are telling the strongest community action story possible. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Cook to get us started on what Next Generation is.
Thanks, Rae, and hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. First off, we wanted to just kind of touch base on what Roma Next Generation is and how that fits into the theory of change that we'll get to spend a lot of time reviewing and talking over. So really, Roma Next Generation builds on the Roma Foundation. So just as Roma has served community action well for over 20 years, Roma Next Generation will represent a new level that really moves us forward as a network and strengthens community action for what we hope to last for over 5 to 10 years. Roma Next Generation tools and practices are a substantial overhaul and refinement of existing Roma tools and practices. So you've probably had some time now to look through some of the components and are starting to notice some of the changes and modifications. So as you're reviewing that, just keep in mind that Roma Next Generation maintains many of the elements of the prior system, and some reporting elements will be similar, if not identical, to existing data. While some elements of Roma Next Generation will be familiar, there have been substantial updates to CSBG National Performance Indicators for individuals and families, and new tools added to capture community-level change, which often takes more than 1 year to achieve. So you'll notice we have the new community-level efforts in progress tool. Roma Next Generation also introduces new tools and a new framework to support the analysis of services and strategies provided and the impact of these services and strategies on individual and community-level change. So again, you're probably noticing some of these changes in your review, but we just want to keep this in mind as we look at our theory of change graphic. So just to reiterate what you should be thinking of with Roma Next Generation, there's a change in focus, a change in reporting, and many of these changes will require an upgrade in some of the existing data collection systems. So in terms of the change in focus, it's really a shift in emphasizing both reporting and analysis. when it comes to the data that we will get from Roma Next Generation. We're also trying to look closer at what works for whom as a result of what services. So kind of making the link between services and strategies and outcomes. There's also a greater emphasis on having an unduplicated count of individuals and households, which you'll see in some of the demographics reports. And in terms of the change in reporting, we've really been thinking about how to better tell the CSBG story. You'll see that we've revised the NPIs to try to help us tell the story better. And then the new services and strategies list, that'll be a change in reporting to help us tell that story better. And then it's an overall change in the reporting format. And as I touched on before, many of the changes in the indicators and the reporting format will also kind of move us forward in upgrading data collection systems at both the local level and state and national level. So also important to keep in mind is that Roma Next Generation will build upon the organizational standards and state and federal accountability measures to really help achieve the full potential of CSBG. So in an effort to help the CSBG network increase accountability and achieve results, OCS launched several initiatives back in 2012, all part of a new performance management framework. One focused on establishing organizational standards for eligible entities, which I know everyone's getting very familiar with now. And then a second component of the new performance management framework was focused on the state and federal accountability measures. So the final phase of this work is focused on enhancing the network's performance and outcome measurement systems for local eligible entities, which is bringing us to Roma Next Generation. And then we have a helpful graphic to help us think more about the performance management framework. It's also a part of our theory of change, but we're hoping that it will help us answer two questions, one being how well did the network operate, and the second, what difference did the network make? So we have the organizational standards, the state and federal accountability measures, and Roma to help us answer how well the network operates. And then to help us look at what difference we make, we're really looking at results, which we find from our indicators for individuals and families, and also our indicators for communities. So with that, I'll turn this over to Barbara Mooney.
Thank you. I get to talk a little bit about how this theory of change that you have for comment was developed and what it is. What is a theory of change? The national theory of change that we've presented really lays out a set of principles and assumptions about community action, about the network purpose, about the network results. It becomes this overarching framework that describes the Community Action Network and acts as a foundation for local agencies as they think about their local community needs and then plan for how they're going to respond to those needs. A theory of change should help in the selection of new and innovative services and strategies, both at the individual and family level and at the community level. So it should be a way to help think about what we will do, how we will respond. And then it's also a way to assure that our network is meeting its roots, its primary function, its role as an anti-poverty agent, and that it's contributing to long-term national goals. Why do we need to have a theory of change? Well, part of it is that when we talk about our network, when we talk about community action, outside of the people that are our partners or our funders or our collaborators, it's difficult for people to understand the complexity of what we're dealing with at community action. And so this unified theory of change is a way to help us illustrate that complexity. It also helps us to clearly articulate what it is that guides us, the principles and the assumptions that are guiding principles. And it helps us to identify the uniqueness of our network, the uniqueness of the way we operate with local control, but that local control is based on mutually agreed upon long-term anti-poverty goals. So where did we get the information that we put into this theory of change? Well, we've been working on talking to you, to the network, about a theory of change for the past 3 years. We started talking about what is it that the network believes it does? What does the network believe about poverty and about what our role is in moving families, individuals, and communities out of poverty. We started with a team from the Roma Next Generation Center of Excellence, and we reached out to get information from people. And we did that with in-person sessions at conferences, at conventions, at meetings of all kinds. We did webinars. We did individual interviews with people across the country. And then after gathering all that information and having a lot of words on paper that you all have seen over time and have responded to, we worked with the Roma Next Generation work group beginning in August of 2015 to actually look at how to convert that into a simple graphic that would help us to talk about community action easily. So why will we use this theory of change?
Barbara, I'm sorry to interrupt. Before you move forward, we're having a little trouble hearing you. If you could maybe bring your mic closer, you're breaking up just a little bit.
I'm sorry, Jovita, but I have my hand held set of my phone and it's up against my mouth. I'm not on speaker. I'm just on my phone. So I'll try to speak into it more clearly, but I'm sorry, if we continue to have difficulty, I might try to do something else.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So when we're looking at needing a theory of change, we really have had some big questions that were posed. Is community action working? Is it doing things that work? Excuse me. How is it unique from other social service networks? So you say you do this and that and the other, but how is that actually unique from the rest of the way that other social service networks work? How does the local need process really inform the selection of the services and strategies? And what's changed? So we said one of the things that we believed is that the conditions in the community and the family successes really rely on each other, but do we really believe that? We talk about the causes and conditions of poverty and talk about moving people towards economic security, but how is this happening, and how do we evaluate all of this that we do? So we thought we needed to address those big questions, and a theory of change will do that. It'll do that by having a common framework to produce change, by demonstrating a broad picture that includes things like goals and principles and systems capacity and the assumptions that guide us in moving towards those long-term goals. And it connects things. It provides a connection between what is done and what is changed. And it really talks about how the network capacity at all the levels will be assessed. this is a sampling of services and strategies included that really helps to talk about the wide range of issues that's addressed by the network. So let's look at the actual document that you're going to be asked to respond to. This is a graphic, and it's tiny on your screen probably, but you'll be able to print it out and look at it in greater detail, and we'll look at each of the pieces as we go forward. But at the top, you'll see the community action goals and then a set of strategies and services. To the left is core principles, to the right, performance management, and underneath all is a statement of a foundational statement. And these are the pieces of the theory of change that you'll be asked to respond to. So what are these key elements of the theory of change? The first one is about the national goals. And you'll see that we have 3 national goals proposed. And those goals are individuals and families with low income are stable and achieve economic security. The second is that communities where people with low income live are healthy and offer economic opportunity. The third is people with low income are engaged and active in building opportunities in their community. As you respond to the survey, you're really going to consider the role of the national goals in the work that you do. These goals, these 3 proposed goals, really focus on the results of the network activity. And it helps us to see how we can align this set of common national goals with our performance management framework, that it acts in concert and that it strengthens the theory of change in these 3 proposed goals. I'm just going to say a few things about how the language has changed from the 6 goals that we know now. We see goals 1 and 6 are combined. This is in recognition that movement from in crisis to thriving is a continuum. And families include both individuals who may be able to seek employment, which is our current Goal 1 focus, and those who can't, which is the current Goal 6 focus. And so this alignment, could you go back one page so they can see the goals? Sorry. So you see that first goal really talks about both, about families moving towards stability and those to achieve economic security. There's been quite a lot of discussion about this term economic security and how it's a much stronger term than the old language in the current goals. You'll see that the second one is about communities. And it's not just about conditions in which low-income people live, but it's specifically designed so that there's an outcome, that the communities are healthy and offer economic opportunity. And the third goal is restated to clarify what the stake is that people will have in their communities, that they'll be engaged and active in building opportunities in their community. You'll see Goal 6 language, or Goal 4 language in the current system about partnerships is included in the services and strategies, and I'll point that out when we get there. And the Goal 5 agency capacity information is really identified as one of the core principles and as the foundation of the entire performance management system in the theory of change. It's captured in some expanded CSBG expenditure reports, which are included in another presentation, and some other ways that we're looking at talking about agency capacity. But agency capacity isn't the result of our network's work. It's the basis of the work that we do. And these 3 goals are strong statements of what all of the things that we do will achieve. Okay, if you could go on, skip that next one and then go on. Thank you. Okay, so this is the core principles. This is at the bottom of the page. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things together that The core principles really talk about what do we think about poverty, what do we believe about poverty, and how important is local determination. We say that it's important that community action builds local solutions specific to local needs, and that's a key piece of what we believe our network is responsible for. We talk about a continuum of needs, that families need to be stable as a foundation for movement towards economic security. We talk about how individual change and community change are connected, and that it's an important thing that we look at both levels of outcomes. And that it takes a village, the people with low income, partners, citizens, and a range of resources to meet the complexity of the issues of poverty, and that direct service alone will not produce systemic change. So those are the pieces of our core principle that we need to consider. And then we look at systems capacity. In the foundational statement at the bottom of the theory of change, you'll see a national network of over 1,000 high-performing community action agencies, state associations, state offices, and federal partners supported by the Community Service Block Grant to mobilize communities to fight poverty. There's a lot packed into that simple sentence. It talks about the different elements of our system that create our system's capacity. It also speaks to agency capacity in that we have high-performing agencies, and that there are over 1,000 of us that are determined to fight poverty. And then the last piece to look at here before we stop for a moment is the performance measurement and management graphic that you saw that Lauren just talked about. And these are pieces of how we will measure things like organizational capacity and systems capacity through state and federal accountability measures, and how it's all framed by a results orientation and a focus on both management and accountability, and that we have clear and understandable performance indicators to measure outcomes. So next, I think we have some polling that I'm going to turn it back over to Jovita.
Okay, so we do have 4 questions we'd like you to respond to. At this time, you should see the poll on your screen or to the left of your screen, and it looks like folks have started to respond. Once again, just want to make sure folks see that there are 4 different questions. You can either select whether or not you agree or disagree. Okay. So we've got a bit more time before we close the poll. But we would really appreciate it if everyone who is participating in the webinar would take a moment to complete this brief survey.
We know we have a lot of people on the call. I think we have over 400. But we do have time built into this, so it would be helpful just to get a snapshot of the folks on the phone. You'll have plenty of time to answer similar kinds of questions when you go to the survey, and that'll be very important for you to be thinking about. But this just gives you a sense of the kind of things that we are we're hoping to get, the kind of information we're hoping to get from you all.
And it looks like we're about at only about 73% in terms of those who've completed. So we'll take maybe another minute or so, and just once again, if you could, we'd greatly appreciate it. And since, Barbara, you mentioned the surveys, I'll just share that for the surveys, you'll have an opportunity not only to do this kind of, provide this kind of survey response, but you'll also be asked some open-ended questions so that you can provide additional comments and suggested language or edits as you may have concerns or questions or insight.
And I know people will be interested to know how things got put in and how things got left out, and why language is different now than what it might have been when you saw it last. And I can only say that your responses will be important as we review the network feedback to see what maybe needs to be included or not included going forward. But keep in mind that we only have a small space. Our charge was to have a graphic that is that sits on a single page. So that's important for us to understand. And the question number 4, is there sufficient focus on agency and systems quality to demonstrate our commitment to it? It's a commitment to agency and systems quality. Is there enough in this theory of change that shows our commitment to the issues of agency and systems quality?
Okay, and I see the responses are starting to slow down. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like we had a couple of folks who were in the process, so we're gathering their responses.
So it looks like a strong agreement that the whole network is represented. And we did have a few that were no answer, 66. That's not very many. That's quite good. Thank you very much for participating. We still have a number of undecideds, and is the whole network represented? We'll be able to think more about that and respond more fully in the survey. Is it clear that the various elements of the network work together? Again, it looks like we have more agreement, but still some undecided. So we'll be looking for more information as you look at the theory of change in greater depth. Do you see both measurement and management? This is one of those things that we really want to assure comes across, is that we're collecting and using data for both accountability and for management. So it looks like there is a little more disagreement on this one, a few more disagreed on this one, but again, we have a lot of undecided and no answers to consider. And then, mostly people felt undecided about that last one. Although we do have strong agreement. So it looks like, at least the folks on the phone, we might be headed in the right direction with this. We might have some tweaking to do, and we'll be looking forward to your responses on the survey to help us to do that. Oh, thank you. We do have another little poll coming up here in just a minute, but we're going to talk first about the last aspect of the theory of change that we didn't mention in those 4 questions. Then it's about services and strategies. In our Roma Next Generation language, as we roll it out, and as we start to talk about the family and community level changes, you'll be seeing these terms, services and strategies, and they mean something specific in the Roma Next Gen language. When we talk about services, we're talking about activities that are directed to individuals and families. And that when we talk about strategies, we're talking about activities that are directed to the community at large that will, of course, at some point affect families and individuals, but that are designed to make community-level changes. So you'll see that this piece of the graphic represents a number of different domains. It shows how we address a range of issues, and it also shows that we work on those two levels, the family, individual, and community levels. There's some implication that some things may be preconditions for other things, so that we might need to do, we might need to have indicators of success in some areas, and that would move towards higher level outcomes. So that's what the services and strategies piece of the theory of change graphic looks like, and we would like to ask you 2 questions about this. And here again, you'll have a chance to do a response. There are only 2 questions, so it won't take as long. Please, if you have something, any questions about it, just let us know. But the questions are, is this an appropriate sampling of both things that we do at the family level and the community level? And are the icons clear? Those are the 2 polling questions. And could we, I don't know, can we go back to look at the, oh, here, I got it to go back. That you see, that, oh, wait, here, I got it, one more. That you see where the services and strategies there are in the darker blue. They're between the performance, the principles in the performance management section and the goals. Javita, have you posted the poll yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. Yes, right. Okay, so that's it. We're in the process of changing from the first poll to the second one. There we go. Okay. So there's the first question, is this an appropriate sampling of both services and strategies, meaning work at both the family level and at the community level? And while you're answering that question, I'll point out to you that on the right side of the screen, you'll see partnerships in that middle circle. That's where I meant to make sure to show you that we're looking at partnerships as being a strategy to achieve one of the national goals rather than it being a goal in itself. We've talked about this quite a while in the Roma discussions, that it's really not just about counting the number of partnerships, but what actually do they achieve. And so we feel that it's more appropriately placed here in the services and strategies section, still very prominent, still very important, but not a goal in itself. How are we doing with the poll, Javita?
It looks like we're just now reaching about half of the folks who are on the call having responded, so we'll give it a little bit more time. It does look like folks are still responding. I can still see some change in the numbers here. And it looks like we're just now at about 75%, but I see the numbers are still moving, so we'll give it just a few more minutes or so.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jovina. So you'll be, as you're looking at this to answer survey, or in your response to the survey, you'll be thinking about the icons Are they clearly representing the domains? Excuse me. Is it appropriate sampling?
Okay, we're slowing down, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And it does look like we had a few folks who were in the progress of submitting their answers, so we're just capturing those results. And we should be able to see the results for this question.
Okay, William. About the same breakdown as what we had before. So, so the folks that are undecided might need to shoot us some messages at RomaNextGen 2016@gmail.com to get some other information to help to clarify what might need to be clarified to become more decided.
And then we had one more. There was a second part to that question about the icons, Barbara.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is a separate poll. Thanks. Okay. And so while you're answering this one about are they clear, one of the participants is saying that it's unclear which are services and which are strategies. The idea from the designers were that those on the left, closer to the word services with the three little people, would be family and agency level, and those on the right would be community level. But again, if that's not clear, we might need to help that.
And it looks like we have about half of the folks on the call having responded, but I still see some movement, so we'll keep it open a while longer.
Okay. A lot of questions about what's included and what isn't included. The key to this is that it's a sampling of services and strategies, and that everything that your agency does or doesn't do would not be included. And when we talk a little bit later about a local theory of change, you know, we might be able to put some additional information in your local theory of change that would show it clearer what exactly you are engaged in, what the services and strategies are that you're engaged in. And where might crisis services fall? I guess that's up to you to think about and to tell us what you feel, but family support services might be a place, or depending upon what kinds of crisis services they are, maybe housing. So this is just a graphic, remember, it's not as many words as some of the theories of change that we've shown you before.
So we're just waiting for a few more responses before we show the results of this poll.
How are we doing on time?
Looks like we're doing pretty good.
Okay, good.
Okay, and you should be able to see the results.
and this is, are the icons clear? This one. I don't see the results yet. Does anyone else see the icons or the polling?
Well, I can see it here on the back end, and it does look like we have about, we do have some folks that maybe disagree or undecided still, but it looks like we're getting a number of 42% who responded agreed, and we had about 7% strongly agreed.
Okay. Okay, so if you have any thoughts about how the icons could be made clearer, you might have a graphic in mind that would be a better demonstration of something. For example, there was one question about advocacy. Is that graphic really clear about, is there really advocacy there? So it would be a question of, well, is there something that you can think of that might be better, that could show something clearer? Oh yes, I'm looking at it. It is a little unclear. So remember, this is the section about services and strategies, and all of these taken together would show results at the top part under the community goals. So the results would be up in the top part under the goals. This is the services and strategies. This is what we would do. Of course, there would have to be some detailed descriptions of all of these things so that we are all talking about them in a similar way. But we're going to talk in just a minute about some of the uses of this. As we go forward. So, okay, all right. So that's the polling questions there. We do have a couple more things we want you to think about as you move towards answering questions on the survey. Just some things to think about. What stands out to you? Do you think it's the uniqueness of community action is clear? And then just are there anything that you might suggest? And we've got some good suggestions coming in the chat, and we'll capture that. That will, we'll be able to provide you with more information about all of this for further thought. Okay, so speaking of the survey, I'm going to turn this over to Lauren to talk a little bit about what that survey will look like.
And I've been looking over these as Barbara's been walking us through the slides. And I just want to reiterate that the surveys are, in addition to the chat, a great place to enter all of your feedback on each piece of Roma Next Generation. But if we just focus on the theory of change and the national goals, we'll look at Survey 1. And you can find the link to Survey 1 as well as a copy of the survey in PDF format and also a Word document on our website in that component guide under the theory of change and national goals. So our hope is that you could use the Word document to maybe keep a record of your feedback, make it easy for you to copy and paste into the survey once you're ready. But again, Survey 1 is really focused on giving you an opportunity to give us feedback on each piece of the theory of change and the national goals, and also give us some feedback on how you think you might use the theory of change in your role. So to give you an idea of how we're collecting this feedback, first we'd like to know your thoughts just on the theory of change in general. So how does the national theory of change serve as a national framework for what community action represents? So you'll have an opportunity to kind of give that a rating and then expand upon that in an open-ended comment. And you'll see that we really want your feedback on things that you like and you do not like. But if there's something that might be problematic or you think needs to be changed, please let us know. Please tell us what you think might work better and make sure that that makes it onto the survey. We're also asking that you tell us how important any of those changes or suggestions are to you, so that as we're reviewing all of the feedback from the network, we can really concentrate on what is most important to everyone and make sure that we address that in some of the changes we'll make as we move forward in this process. So also in the survey, we ask that you kind of rate each section of the theory of change, the goals, services and strategies, the core principles, the performance management piece, and also that kind of foundational statement at the bottom of the theory of change. So once you rate each of these pieces, you'll then have the opportunity to give us your open-ended comments. So that could be your feedback on what kind of changes we should make, if anything needs to be modified. You can tell us what you do like about the theory of change. That's helpful as well, so that we can kind of use that in our thinking of how to fix some of the problem areas. We also want to know how you'll use this graphic. So maybe you'll use it as a tool to describe community action's mission, vision, and purpose. When you're working with stakeholders in your community, you might use it to educate local or state legislatures, inform funders, set your own strategic goals, evaluate the performance of your leadership team. So we really want to get a sense of how this can be a working document for people in the field. Also, if you have some ideas we haven't listed here, please tell us. We can use that as we kind of share information with the rest of the network. So now that we've talked a little bit about how you can use this tool, I'll pass it back over to Barbara to walk us through that.
Okay, so you saw on the survey there were some issues, some things about using the tools, using a theory of change, and just wanted to real briefly say, just talk a few seconds about the different pieces of the Roma cycle and how the theory of change really can be used throughout the implementation of the full Roma cycle. So the first area, of course, is planning. It actually is about planning and community assessment, so it's really about the first two phases of the Roma cycle. The theory of change helps sort through your community needs assessment data. What does that data tell you about your community that you work in, and how does it relate to the assumptions in the theory of change, and then how can you use that to make your strategic plan for your agency. So it's a way to think about how you can move from the theory of change, or from the theory of change to the community needs assessment data to your strategic plan. Then as you start to think about implementing services and strategies, it gets you to think about your anti-poverty role and to think about those services and strategies that you're picking to include in your strategic plan. Are those the right services and strategies that really reflect your anti-poverty role? Do they really reflect the goals, the three national goals, the big goals, moving people to economic security, improving the conditions and the opportunities in communities. And then you can use the theory of change to really think about your effectiveness in terms of the overall performance of what you do. How effective are you in making changes? It's a theory of change, after all, so it's about changes. And so part of what you'll be able to do is think about assessing your results, what's going to be observed and measured, and that will include those performance indicators that you see in the theory of change, that common set of indicators that talk about both outcomes at the family level and at the community level. And it really, we're hoping that the new indicators will also help you make the connections about how the services actually move towards the one or more of the national goals. And then finally, it really helps you to analyze all of this data. You've heard us talk again and again about how Roma Next Generation is about analysis of the data. And so we're looking at did we do what we thought we were going to do? Did the outcomes really validate our assumptions? How effective is our performance? You know, how well did we meet the needs that we identified in our community assessment? So it all fits into our concept of this overarching theory that we're going to be changing something. And then that, of course, leads into the reassessment and the next planning process, so back through the cycle. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, and we need to close with here, is this understanding that this national theory of change will be a framework for you, but really, if we can go to the next slide. Other uses, sorry. So other things that can talk with you. We're hoping that this is a document that you can take outside your network or even to your board or to your partners and say, this is our mission, vision, and purpose. You can use it for legislators and funders and board members and just in general in messaging with your community. So we're hoping that this can be useful to you to show that you're part of this national framework, and then to be able to modify this theory of change to a local theory of change. And this is then the last thing that I want to say. I want to present. Next slide. Okay, that each agency will be helping to identify its own theory of change. So when I spoke earlier about how the strategies and the services may not be exactly what you do, but you could replace those with things that are more specific to your own agency. And you could decide which services and strategies are most specific based on what you and your agency and your board talks about and says, this is what we propose to change. This is the local need in our community, but that it is still connected to the overarching network goals and to the overarching network assumptions and core principles and performance management framework. So it's just a way to help to make that more specific. And NASCSP and the Community Action Partnership are working to create a series of trainings to help agencies really modify the national theory of change to use at their local level for as part of the planning cycle. So you'll hear more about that as we go forward. Just wanted to close this up by talking about that local level. We're open for questions, and then then we'll leave you with the list of webinars that are coming up. So there are questions, I think, and someone has been collecting them, and we'll be able to bring them up if I haven't already answered them.
Yes, and as the panelists are taking time to review your questions, if you have additional questions or have yet to submit a question, feel free to do so at this time. You can enter it in the chat box. And once again, if you do recall the slide number or the topic, that your question is related to, that would be very helpful. And if there's a specific panelist to which you'd like to address your question, if you could send that along too, that would really help us to facilitate the Q&A period. And also just want to reiterate, as we have on previous calls, that your review of the components of the Roma Next Generation pieces is critical. The initial comment period provided by NASCSP spans from, it began on March 3rd, and it will end on April 1st. It will then be followed, of course, by the official Office of Management and Budget clearance process. So please keep an eye out as we continue to release the surveys for each of the Roma Next Generation components. I'm going to send now, once again, the email address if after you've reviewed the components and you have also, reviewed the surveys and you have some additional questions, there is a specific email address, which is now in the chat menu, that you should send your questions to, and that's Roma Next Generation 2016@gmail.com. And once again, do want to remind you to sign up for the upcoming webinars. This is an opportunity outside of reviewing the components and reviewing the survey questions to really speak with those who have been intimately involved, NASCSP staff, the Roma work group, OCS, the partnership, related to any questions you might have about how we're going to be moving forward together as a network to implement Roma Next Generation. And as was noted, the surveys, however, will be serving as the primary method for gathering critical feedback. So if at all possible, please do participate in the survey and provide your comments in the survey. Once again, what that allows us to do is to really associate any comments or questions that we're receiving with a specific Roma Next Generation component and a specific section of that component. So at this time, I'm going to see if our panelists are ready to begin the Q&A period. But we may need a few more minutes because I do see that we have some additional questions coming in. So once again, we do appreciate those. And if we're not able to answer all of the questions on this webinar, if we're not able to get to each and every one, please be assured that we have a plan for developing a Q&A document or an FAQ. And we'll be doing that as soon as possible. And once that's posted to the NASCSP website, we will send an e-blast to the network so that folks can have some additional information for the components as they've been presented on each of these webinars.
Hi, Jovita. This is Rae Tamblyn from NASCSP. So we do have several questions that have come in, and this is, I've just decided to consolidate. Some of these questions are more specific than others, but in general, it seems like one of the questions that we're hearing from the participants on this webinar is how did we end up at the strategies and services that are included in the Roma Next Generation theory of change. So the question is, can we speak to how we've ended up with these icons and examples, and what the process would be for suggestions or revisions to these examples to better showcase community action's work? And then Barbara, if you'd like to respond to that question, and then Lauren and I will chime in as well.
Okay, can you say it again?
Sure. So the question in general is how we ended up with the services and strategies that are included on the theory of change graphic, and what the process would be if an attendee or respondent feels strongly that these are not the best, or that there should be changes to these services and strategies on the graphic.
Okay, it didn't sound any better the second time. So the way that we came up with these was really by process. We've gotten a lot of feedback from individuals across the country as we started to roll out the theory of change about what services and strategies were most important to identify. I think these are really the result of a focused work group that have been looking at the final graphics And if you feel strongly about them, just let us know. And if you have ideas about how the graphics could be improved, if you have a different graphic that you would like to suggest, just saying this is not a good graphic isn't as helpful as saying how about using this graphic instead, because we have searched and searched and searched graphic representations, and icons are difficult to come by. It's you know, how do you represent something like a policy change or advocacy or something that's more amorphous and very important to us? So anything that you can suggest to us, this is the time to make that suggestion. And then as we get those suggestions, we can send them back out, we can post them, we can have additional information.
Thanks, Barbara. Thank you, Barbara. And everyone, this is Lauren. If I can just add that we have spent a lot of time looking at the services and strategies that we list on the theory of change, and have talked about whether or not they should be a little bit more specific or a little bit more general. So if we say housing, to kind of capture all of the services that you could provide under housing, or we say housing placements, so that people either inside or outside of the network would have a little bit better understanding of what we're talking about here. So if you can please give us your thoughts on how we could you know, possibly rework that or describe the surveys and strategies that we list, so that it is as clear as possible, but also can be a document that's used all over the country by people in different roles and speaking to different audiences. That would be really helpful and something that we would love to see in the surveys. And we're already seeing feedback coming through on the chat, so I just wanted to point that out as well.
This is Rae Tamblyn. We do have a question on when the surveys are due. The surveys do not have a specific due date. However, our initial comment period is running from March 3rd until April 1st, 2016. So I do encourage you to fill out and submit the surveys sooner than later, since we will then be looking at all of your responses and your feedback and working to address whatever issues or comments may have been included in the survey. So while there is no specific due date, we do encourage that you fill out the survey sooner than later.
Okay.
Barbara, we do have a question on, is the local theory of change going to be a requirement?
No, it's certainly not going to be a requirement. We feel that it'll be best practice and that people will be able to make most use of the theory of change process if they consider creating a local theory of change as part of their planning process. There will be some templates available. There'll be a way to customize local theory, the theory of change graphic to make it local. So there'll be some tools out there to make it easy. So we're hoping that it's easy enough and that it makes enough sense to agencies as they move forward in Roma Next Gen activities to really be able to have this theory of change. I think it's not the local theory of change development isn't required, but the idea that agencies should really step back and think about what they are about and what they expect to see change is going to be an important point of a part of how they analyze their data going forward.
Thank you, Barbara. We have a question on what the difference really is between collective impact and how that differs from partnerships. And I'll ask Lauren Cook to take the first response at that, and Barbara, you can fill in any of the gaps after she's done.
Sure, I think that's a really good question to ask and bring up. And I would first point you to the community level efforts and progress tool that is posted on the website, because it contains a separate report for agencies who are a part of a collective impact. And when you look at that report, you'll be able to see the components of a collective impact initiative. So it really lists it all out pretty clearly for you. But it is slightly different than partnerships that your agency would have in the community, in that it's usually with multiple agencies from possibly multiple sectors in the community who all work on a common agenda. A backbone agency is identified, and there are some suggested kind of benchmarks as you're working in a collective impact initiative. So again, first I'd just point you into the direction of the Efforts in Progress tool, and also say that tomorrow we'll be holding the community level work webinar. So we'll take a deeper dive into community level work and the revisions we've made in Roma Next Generation, and also we'll talk more about collective impact.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that if you could join us tomorrow with that session, and then you look at the PowerPoint, there'll be some discussion about what is collective impact, and just briefly that it's a specific kind of collaboration or partnership that has 5 key essential elements to it. If you don't get enough information from the website or from our webinar tomorrow, there's a lot of information on the web. Just Google collective impact. There's a collective impact forum. There's a number of interesting resources available.
Thank you, Barbara. There is a question on how we would like responses for the surveys, if we would like agency responses for the surveys, statewide responses, or both, and I'll ask Lauren to answer that.
Thank you for this question also. We've made some effort to build the surveys in a way that allows you to answer in any of these ways, and also tell us that you maybe are representing additional agencies with your one response. So there's the flexibility to answer as a single agency, as a single person. You can also organize statewide responses, and there's some guidance in the survey about how you would identify which method you chose. There is one response permitted per device or computer, so that's important to think about as you're entering your responses. But within one agency, multiple people can submit a response if that's how you've decided to do it. We do know of some states who are organizing a listening session or a statewide meeting that they hold over several days because they've decided to collect and organize their comments and submit it by the state would submit it for all of their agencies. So we've built in the ability to say how many people are represented and what state you're answering from.
So we have, thank you, Lauren. We have a question on whether the current 6 national goals will be replaced with the 3 proposed ones, and how that would impact the IS survey. So I will take the first response for this, and if Barbara or Lauren has anything to add, feel free to jump in after I do my best to answer this one. So the proposal is that, yes, these 3 new goals will replace the current 6 national goals. With regards to how that would impact the IS survey, the IS survey will move forward with the new proposed indicators. And so after the Roma Next Generation components are finalized and we move forward with data collection around Roma Next Generation, elements of the current IS survey will remain as historical data, but due to the changes in the language and our data collection process, that would be a historical data element and not something that we would be able to directly compare, as that would be an apples to oranges comparison. So the current 6 national goals and the current NPIs and the current IS survey will continue to be collected upon for this year, and we do have on the components guide notes about timelines and rollouts for the data collection for the indicators moving forward under Roma Next Generation. So yes, it will impact the IS survey, and yes, our proposal is that the 6 national goals will be replaced with the 3 proposed national goals at the top of this national theory of change.
And this is Barbara. I'll jump in with a couple comments. You'll see through the Roma Next Generation material that we've realigned some of the language. We haven't eliminated partnerships. We've included that in strategies. We haven't eliminated agency capacity. We've included it in the CSBG expenditures and in the foundational work of the theory of change. But in the movement towards a next generation performance management system, the new goals are those that are most useful to tell the story about what we affect in the outside world, what changes we make for families, individuals, families, and communities.
Thank you, Barbara. We're just taking a quick second to make sure that we're responding to the questions that are still coming in. So just 1 second while we review. We have a question on whether or not there will be documents available for review prior to taking the full survey, and this is in response to our comment that we are unfortunately limited to one computer or one IP address per survey response. And so we have provided the surveys in PDF and Word for your review to help with time management and for you to gather your thoughts and responses into one document prior to taking the survey. So we hope that between the ability to save and come back to the survey in its online format, using the same computer, and being able to preview and discuss your responses, perhaps internally if you're going to be responding on behalf of your agency or after a meeting. We have those documents available for you on the Roma Next Generation Guide. So it looks like we are wrapping up on the questions that we're seeing. We do encourage you to use the Roma Next Generation 2016 email address, as well as to go to the NASCSP Roma site and use our components guide and really use that survey as a way to dive into the theory of change in these national goals and our proposals. And I think, oh, right. Lauren has already plugged our community level webinar tomorrow, and we really do encourage you to attend this webinar, as it will go into a great deal of detail around the difference between collective impact, partnership, and what it means to be doing community level work, and how we're going to collect on the work that you are doing and capture the results, as well as the work that you're doing prior to achieving an outcome. We also have an individual and family level webinar scheduled for March 17th, and this is the same day as the NCAF interactive session. So for those of you who are at the NCAF session, do remember that all of these webinars will be recorded and posted to that components guide for re-listening. And lastly, we have a Tying It All Together, which will be on March 22nd. And this will be broad overview, as well as a bringing it all back together and delving a little more deeply into how Roma Next Generation will be used for analysis and not just as a reporting tool. And all of the links to register for that, for these webinars are available on the components guide, and we'll be updating that with PDFs of the slides from each of the webinars as well as the recordings as they become available.
So in closing, we'd like to again thank everyone for being on the webinar, for sending us your thoughts so far on the theory of change, and please send us your thoughts in the survey. Please contact us in the Gmail account if you're having questions or any issues with any of the documents, and we really look forward to hopefully seeing a lot of you on the webinar tomorrow. Barbara, did you want to say anything else before we wrap up?
No, just thank you very much for your time today, and looking forward to your comments and the comments of those who you influence to also take the surveys. Looking forward to all those comments regarding this very important area, and looking forward to hearing more questions as we roll out the rest of the elements over the next couple weeks.
All right, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to hearing you or seeing you online tomorrow as well.